About 12 years ago, I had the privilege of attending a workshop, an Abraham workshop. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the teachings of Abraham, and Esther and Jerry Hicks presented that workshop. Well, the teachings of Abraham have often been associated with the law of attraction, because that's an emphasis that's often given there. Abraham is a non-physical entity channeled by Esther Hicks. And it was a not really crazy, but just a very direct, wonderful experience to sit and listen to that wisdom that came from a source that we couldn't see. And that has to do with faith. One of the things, well, one of the books that came out of that is a book called Ask and It Is Given. And some of you may be familiar with this. And in that book, the idea of learning to manifest your desires, well, one of the tools that Esther and Jerry put in that book is an emotional guidance scale. There were 22 emotions listed, all the way from despair on the bottom to joy and love on the top. Well, I don't have 22 notes on the scale this morning, just 8. But I'd like to talk about a faith scale, the bottom of it, the top of it, and the moving up. Because Esther said, we just reach for that next feeling that's improved a little bit. We just reach up a little bit. We don't have to make the jump from the bottom to the top, all in one huge leap. We just move up that scale. And that's what we'd like to talk about today. Of course, our agenda for today is our theme, the theme of faith. We're going to talk about not the emotions that you'll find in this Ask and It Is Given, but we're going to talk about states of consciousness. Consciousness is a word we use lots, and it's difficult to get a real handle on it sometimes. Let me give you what our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, says when we talk about consciousness. And consciousness is the composite of ideas, thoughts, emotions, sensation, and knowledge that makes up the conscious, subconscious, and superconscious phases of mind. Well, that's a lot to get a hold of. So we're just going to talk about thoughts and feelings today. That will encompass this, but it stands for something even larger than that. So what is faith, and what are the states of consciousness related? That's what we're going to talk about. Of course, faith is defined as one of the 12 powers of unity, and that's the ability to believe with confidence. The ability to believe with confidence, and that's where we're headed as we go up the scale. But I'm not going to talk about it in terms of the scale. In the meantime, as I prepared, I thought, and you brought this up, Betty, it's climbing up to the next rung. I thought of the stepladder of faith. And so I've created, at least in my imagination, I hope it gets transferred into yours, the stepladder of faith. A key spiritual truth that I came up with for this message. It's in the form of an affirmation. I choose to step up to a higher state of consciousness and realize my potential. So often we feel defeated because we don't realize our potential. At least I feel that way. I imagine some of you may do that as well. We're living up to my potential. The possibilities are much greater. And that's what we'll talk about, a way to move up so that more of that potential, more of those possibilities are realized. So we're going to start at step 1, or the bottom rung of the ladder. Think of a step ladder. Got 8 steps, and the bottom one is the same as that emotion that Esther described, despair. Well, despair is defined as the complete loss or absence of hope. Complete. That's the definition you'll get if you go to the dictionary. But there's a little bit of an understanding beneath that, a metaphysical understanding, if you will. And so we look at despair in that light too. Metaphysically, it's a feeling of aloneness, a feeling of no way up, no way out, and a paralyzing of your mental process. Paralyzing. I've been there. I've been in that state of despair. When I was a younger fella, in my 30s, I had a business partnership that failed. It was a restaurant partnership. And it left me, of course, without income and without a lot of hope. During that time, the place where I was living, that I was buying, the car that I was driving, those bills didn't get paid. And so I was sinking more and more into a despair. But it came to a poignant low when I was inquired. Somehow I had been contacted about a job possibility. And I went to inquire about that job possibility. I had at that time a beagle dog that I liked a lot. And I took that dog and put that dog in my car and drove 30 miles to an office suite where I could inquire about this possibility for income because I was without a job. Well, I went into the large building, went up the elevators. It was a pretty tall building, and couldn't find the suite. Couldn't find it at all. It just wasn't there. Tried another floor. Thought maybe I didn't get it right. Maybe the address was something wrong. And I went back down to went down to the space where my car had been. And there on a tree was my dog on a leash tied up. My car had been repossessed. It was a very creative way to repossess cars, but it left me in a state of mental paralysis. I didn't know which way was up. So I took my dog, took the leash, and walked the 30 miles back home, not even able to think about any other alternative. I was at the point of despair. And it was that way for some time because I had a complete absence of hope. There was none for me. But fortunately, at one point, I was able to take a little step up. A glimmer of light occurred. And I took a step up to that second ladder, or the second rung on the ladder. And this is not a positive one particularly easy, but at least it's a step up, and that's worry. So on the step ladder of faith, number 2 is worry. So I began to worry about how I would get around, how soon my house would be repossessed, where I was going to be, and in fact, I became homeless. I was in that despair point of my life. But I began to worry. How am I going to feed myself? How am I going to take care of this dog? How am I going to get a job? Fortunately, I got a little help along the way, and I began to see a therapist that was within walking distance because I was walking. And I began to experience that slightly higher state of consciousness, the state of worry. Now, worry is defined as to touch and disturb repeatedly. One of the definitions in the dictionary. To touch and disturb repeatedly. But if I go under that a little bit more metaphysically, it's a negative mental attitude that prevents good. a step up from despair, absolute loss of hope. But it's still, we've got some, I'm glad we've got 6 more steps to go on the 8-step ladder, because worry is not a place that I want to hang around for very long. I like to think that Thomas, in the stories about Jesus and his disciples, Thomas the disciple was a worrier. This is what I created in my mind anyway. So Jesus, as the story goes, was crucified. And here's Thomas worrying. Look, I've spent all of my life, at least the last 3 or 4 years, following this Messiah, and the Messiah is gone. What am I going to do now? What's my purpose in life? How am I going to go back and look for a profession so I can make my living? What am I going to do? So I think Thomas was a worrier. But Thomas also was able to take another step up, because the third rung on the ladder, the step ladder of faith, is doubt. This again is not wholly positive, but doubt is defined as uncertainty or distrust. And when we look a little deeper metaphysically, it's an unsettled opinion about truth. So Thomas was there, moving up from worry to doubt. The way he wanted to take care of that was to know. He wanted to be certain about something. He wanted to be able to have some physical evidence. And you may remember the story that Jesus told him in the story to look at the nail piercings in my hand. Look at where the spear entered my side. Physical evidence that all was going to be well. And of course, we call him Doubting Thomas. So, but he moved up from that worry state to the state of consciousness of doubt. Now, you don't want to stay around in doubt either too long. If you have ever been in these shoes, you've been there where you just wanted to know, just let me know. Let me know what my purpose is in life. Let me know what the next step is in this situation. I want to know. I want it to be concrete. I want it to really let me know what I'm to do. But in order for that understanding to happen, you have to move up another rung on the ladder. And the next rung begins to be a little bit positive. Next rung is hope. Hope, defined as to desire or to expect, or metaphysically, an expectation of good. Sometimes the acronym for God, G-O-D, is good orderly direction. When you're in that state of hope, you're projecting that this order that you want in your life, this getting things squared away so you do have some understanding. This is hope. Hope, did you notice, is beginning to look up. The first 3 rungs on the ladder, you're kind of just looking at the ladder or at your feet. Now with hope, you begin to look up. Begin to look up. And so your state of consciousness has an opportunity for transformation and change. I remember within the last few years, since I've been here at Unity of Pace, that I arrived at a belief, a full-fledged, never doubted belief that all things work together for good. That's unshakable, as the Daily Word says. And this is hope. But hope, if you stay there, is kind of like a wishing well. We don't want to stay there. So we want to move up that next rung on the ladder, and the next rung is trust. Trust. When I got that understanding that all things work together for good, I was hopeful. And I began to change my conversation. And I think almost always now, I never say, I hope to see you soon. I say, I'll trust that I will see you soon. I've changed out the word hope. Put trust in there. Because trust is that next step up the ladder, a change in consciousness. So, trust is depending on something future. We're looking ahead and saying, it's going to be all right here. Or I know this is going to be taken care of. Or this too shall pass. We're looking forward and seeing something that's very positive. Metaphysically, trust is a positive attitude, seeing that's hoped for as being reliable. Reliable. But it doesn't stop with trust. Trust is a lower level of faith. We've kind of made the change. We're coming up the ladder. And so we're getting on the side of faith, which is where we're headed and beyond. But trust must give way to belief. That belief that I had that all things work together for good was brought into being. I was able to make that step up because I lived with that possibility of all things being good for long enough to where it became a belief for me, something that was unshakable. I'm so grateful for that. So we move up to belief, which is a habit of mind characterized by acceptance and well-settled trust. So belief is, I like that word, well-settled trust. That trust that I had that something in the future is going to be all right is well-settled. It's not going to be shaken. And metaphysically, it's the inner acceptance of something as true. Suddenly, it's not dependent on everything out here and every situation that comes into our lives. It's an inner acceptance of what is true. So we see a little bit of a shift here as we move into belief. Belief is something that also must be built. It's not something that just appears out of the blue. It's something that must be built. And so we engage in the building of belief. When we get down to that part where we say, how do I do that? We'll talk about that a little bit more. But we build that belief over time, mainly by giving our focus to that which calls to us, but we don't quite yet have it as a belief. And so belief is that inner kind of thing. You know, when it's out here, things are going to change all the time. When it's a situation that's in our life, when it's a person that's in our life, it's outside of us. But when we're able to look within, we have the chance of building from within what resides within us anyway. The divine residing within us can help us to build that belief. So it's an inside out sort of thing. But we don't stay in the position of doing that interior work just for belief. We step up from belief to faith. You saw trust, belief, and now faith. So trust and belief are kind of lower levels of that faith that's up there. Faith is to believe with confidence, not just, I believe that. But I believe with confidence. I would stake my life on it. I believe with confidence. The dictionary would say that faith is a firm belief in something that there is no proof for. Something that there is no proof for. And metaphysically, we might say to believe with confidence or conviction. Did you hear in the Daily Word that scripture from Hebrews 11? Faith is the substance or the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. When we get to faith, when we're on that seventh step of this ladder, we don't need the outside evidence like Thomas needed physical evidence. We don't need that because we have coming from within the assurance that that which we've desired and hoped for will be so. We're talking about spiritual maturity here. When we're getting to faith, it's not something for a beginner who's just starting out, who may start somewhere lower down on that ladder. Faith, the ability to believe with confidence, leads us, again, coming from within, to the experience of oneness. We talk about that often. The experience of oneness, when you have this saturation of your soul with a belief and a confidence, then suddenly some of the boundaries or the walls begin to dissolve. And we truly can know the oneness that we are. For me, one of the most exciting, and I know you probably have some of these experiences, maybe for a moment in time. You felt that oneness. You were in a meditation. You were with a group of people, and you felt that oneness. For me, one of the times that just sticks out in my memory is a time when I was at Unity Village. If you've seen pictures of Unity Village, there's a big tower. It's a water tower originally. And on the top of that tower is not really a dome, but a roof. But there's a deck up there underneath that roof that's open, that you can see all directions. And the way that was engineered and built, the curvature of the top of that area was so resonant that sound just amplified naturally. And so you'd stand in the middle of that porch up there, and you'd speak a word, and it just flowed over. And if you're with a group of people, as I was when I was taking classes, my classmates, suddenly those walls, what I didn't like about a classmate or where I disagreed with that, those walls disappeared. Because in that situation where I was able to believe with confidence, I was moving toward this oneness, which brings us to the very top level of the stepladder of faith. It's funny, you would think faith would be at the top, but for me it's not. It's love that is at the top of the stepladder of faith. That experience of oneness, of being saturated with the divine that is the truth of us, of being connected with each and every person, both those around us and really with all that is. We are part of a great oneness. That's what love is. We talk about love as being an energy that just is the substance of the whole universe. Yes, that's so. It's funny, when you look at the definition of love in the dictionary, it seems pretty weak. The best I could come up with is a strong affection assured. A strong affection assured. I'm sorry, that's not love for me anymore. Because metaphysically, it's the ability to harmonize and to unify. That's why I like our name Unity. Because it's emblematic of love that's on this top level of the stepladder of faith. If you remember the scripture in 1 Corinthians 13, it talks about love. And there's a great description of love You've read it, I'm sure. But at the end it says, and now remain these three. And it talks about three of these rungs on the ladder: hope, faith, and love. But the greatest of these is love. It's the top rung on the step ladder of faith. It's a good time to do this. Rick, would you do me a favor? Pass one of these out to everybody. Tom, I have a flash drive with a slide on it, but I never gave it to you. I didn't give it to Tom to put in here. So after we conclude the service, I'll give it to you and you can put it in so we can flash it up there for people.
Thank you.
So here's the step ladder of faith for you with the. I think we have enough to go around. Did I print enough? My printer was running out of ink. I'll wait for a second till Rick gets these passed out. So reviewing for those of you who are with us online, remember what's on the bottom rung? Despair. And worry, a step up, but not much of a step. Then we get to doubt. And then we begin to turn the corner as we start with hope. And then trust. And then faith. Or no, belief. Then faith and love. Thank you, Rick. So, where I usually go at the end of a message, how do I do that? How do I walk up this ladder? How do I go from rung to rung? And I'd like to give you a few pointers. First of all is recognize where you are on the scale. And by the way, you could be up that ladder and slip down a rung or two from time to time. You could almost seem to be alternating between rungs. I don't know how you do that on a real ladder, but that's a possibility because it's not static. It's something that needs to be fed and supported as you move up that step ladder of faith. So recognize where you are on this, acknowledge it. Where are you on this scale, on the step ladder of faith? Got that for the start? Secondly, we talk often about choosing and having the power of choice. Choose the intention for what you want. If you're sitting with hope, choose the intention. I want to be trusting. Now, don't try to go from despair on the bottom and jump up to faith near the top. But take that next step. Improve your consciousness. Raise it just a little bit. When you do that, you have hope of arriving at this higher state of consciousness that you desire. So choose the intention to step up. And then ask what will help me to step up. And I'd like to just mention a couple of things. One of the greatest difficulties that we have when we want to bring something into our lives, and we don't focus on it. Everything else takes our mental time up. We don't hold in mind that which we really want. So focus is key. If you're at trust and you want to move up to belief, put your mind on belief. Certainly don't go back down the other way, but hold your focus on it. Then we talk a lot about affirmations. But the most powerful affirmations, remember, when we're getting to the top, we're talking about inside out. The most positive affirmations are the ones that you write yourself. Not difficult. You could just start with I am. That's a good starting place. Write the affirmation. So if you desire to move up a notch, write an affirmation and use it. I have now in my practice, I wasn't doing this until we began the morning pages in our book study. It kind of went along with that. I write an affirmation every day, a little card, a little yellow card. And on that card, I write my affirmation. One of them goes in my wallet, the other one goes on my desk. And I live with that affirmation throughout the day. Write that affirmation, make it truly you, and visit it often. And then finally, look for it. Look for it in somebody else. Look for it in yourself. Be aware of it. One of the things that we're doing with the Kindness Initiative, Kindness Works, is calling to attention what's happening so that we can become aware of this kindness. And as that floods back into us, it begins to come back out of us. The same is true with this faith scale, and you're moving up that step ladder. Be aware of it in someone else, in another situation. And the more you're aware of it, the more it will produce within you. Going back to Esther Hicks and that emotional guidance scale, ask and it's given tells us just reach up for the next best feeling, the next best, you move up a little bit. I think the same is true with this stepladder of faith. We reach up for a raising of consciousness with intention and with taking these tools that we're talking about and using them to build in our lives the ability to be a person of faith. Again, the key spiritual truth for today. I choose, and this is in the form of an affirmation. By the way, you can use other people's affirmations, but the best ones are the ones you make for yourself. Here's an affirmation. I choose to step up to a higher state of consciousness and realize my potential. And so it is.